Some women fall in love slowly, like a river that takes years to carve a canyon. Others fall fast, like lightning, one sharp strike and the world is never the same again. Victoria Wanda fell like lightning. She just did not know it yet. It was 11:47 at night. The kind of night where the city forgets to be beautiful puddles, swallowing the glow of streetlights, the rain falling sideways, the cold pressing through her thin jacket like it had a personal grudge. She had worked a double shift at the diner, her feet screaming inside her worn shoes, her hair damp, her phone battery at 6%. She opened the rideshare app with shaking fingers and watched the little car icon move toward her. Driver Daniel, rating, 498, black sedan, just get home. Just get home. She did not look up when she climbed in. She did not say more than the address. She pressed her forehead against the cold window and watched the city blur past, hoping quietly, desperately that this night would end before anything else could go wrong. Then the driver spoke. You forgot to buckle your seatbelt. Not a command, not annoyed, just a quiet, steady observation, like someone who noticed small things and cared about them. Victoria blinked, sat up and clicked the belt into place. She glanced at the rearview mirror. Dark eyes, a clean jawline. A man who looked like he had seen a great deal of life and had decided somewhere along the way to be calm about it. She looked away, but she kept thinking about those eyes for days afterward. 3 months later, she married him. Everyone told her she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Her mother, her coworkers, even strangers who heard the story at family gatherings and shook their heads the way people do when they think they are wiser than you. A rideshare driver, Victoria? That is what you settled for? She smiled and said nothing, because she had no words grand enough to explain what Daniel made her feel safe in a way she had never been before, seen in a way that had no price attached to it. She thought she knew who she married. She was wrong, because on the night that powerful men in black armor arrived at her door and dropped to one knee in front of her husband, she discovered that the quiet man she had chosen was not just a driver. He was a king. And the war that had been following him across every city and every highway was finally here. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you are watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. Chapter 1, The Girl Learned to Carry Herself. Victoria Wanda grew up in a house where love was always conditional. Not the cruel, obvious kind of conditional no one shouted or threw things. It was quieter than that. Her mother loved her when she got good grades. Her father was proud of her when she had something to show for herself. The moment she stumbled, that warmth would dim just slightly, like a lamp turned down a notch, and she would feel the chill and scramble to be worthy again. By 26, she had stopped scrambling. Not because she had become cynical, she hadn't. She had simply accepted that certain things in life required you to hold yourself up, because no one else was going to do it for you. She had 2 jobs, the diner on 5th, where she worked mornings and the occasional double, and a small administrative role at a logistics company 3 days a week, which paid exactly enough to keep her rent 3 weeks behind instead of 6. She had a small apartment on the east side of the city, 1 bedroom, a window that faced a brick wall, and a radiator that groaned like an elderly man every time the temperature dropped. She called it home. She meant it. Her best friend, Mary Jackson, called it character building. You could ask your mom for help, you know, Mary said one Thursday, pouring tea into 2 mismatched mugs. She offered, and then listed 7 conditions, Victoria replied. One of them was that I moved back home. Another was that I stopped wearing red. Red looks good on you. I know. They laughed the way women laugh when the only other option is crying, and then they drank their tea and talked about other things. Victoria was not unhappy. She was tired. Yes, the kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and never fully leaves no matter how much you sleep. But she was not broken. She still noticed beautiful things. The way the light came through the diner window on clear mornings, the sound of rain on glass, the particular satisfaction of a table that was perfectly set. She still believed in some quiet and stubborn corner of herself that life could surprise her. She just had no idea how dramatically it was about to. The night she met Daniel was the night her ex-boyfriend, Calvin, decided to make a scene. They had broken up 4 months before. The relationship had been one of those slow disasters, charming at the start, exhausting in the middle, and ugly at the end. Calvin was the kind of man who wanted a woman to need him constantly, and when Victoria showed the slightest independence a night out with Mary, a new job she hadn't consulted him about, he would sulk and punish her with silence until she apologized for things that required no apology. She ended it cleanly, or so she thought. Calvin did not agree with her definition of clean. On that particular night, he appeared outside the diner as she was leaving, waiting under the awning, with his collar turned up and that expression she knew too well, the one that pretended to be sad but was really just angry in disguise. "I just want to talk," he said. "We have talked," she said, and kept walking. He followed her for half a block, his voice rising, not quite shouting, but loud enough that two women on the opposite side of the street glanced over. Victoria kept her face calm and her pace steady, the way she had taught herself to do, but her heart was hammering. Her rideshare arrived before he could reach her. She climbed in, gave the address, and pressed her forehead to the window. "Just breathe. You are fine. You are fine." The driver said nothing. He simply pulled into traffic smoothly, and the silence in the car was not empty. It was the rare kind that feels like company. They were halfway across the city when the driver spoke for the first time. "He followed you to the car." Victoria looked up. "I saw him in the mirror," the man said. "He stopped when you got in, but he was recording your plate." Her stomach dropped. "How do you know it was?" He had his phone pointed directly at the back of the car for about 40 seconds. That is not someone checking the time. She did not know what to say. "Do you have someone you can stay with tonight?" he asked. "Or I can drop you at a police station if you would prefer." His voice was steady, not alarmed, not pitying, just practical in a way that made her feel, strangely, like she was allowed to be scared. "I will be fine," she said. "My building has a security door." "All right," he drove on. No lecture, no questions she had not invited. When she got out of her building, she paused with the door half open. "Thank you," she said, "for noticing." "Sure," he said simply. And then, "You have your keys ready before you get to the door." That is smart. She was inside and up the stairs before she realized she was smiling. His name appeared in her app the next week. Same driver, different side of the city. She had told herself she would not think about him, and had mostly succeeded. Then she saw the name Daniel, and that quiet, precise voice came back to her before she could stop it. He was already at the pickup point when she came out. She opened the door, and their eyes met in the rearview mirror, and something passed between them. Not romance exactly. Recognition. The strange, wordless sense of having been seen clearly once before. "The security door worked," she said as she buckled her belt. One side of his mouth lifted. "Good." They talked for 12 minutes on the way to her appointment. She learned that he had been driving for 2 years, that he had traveled extensively before settling here, that he preferred night shifts because the city was quieter, and the people who needed rides at night usually had better reasons to be out. He learned that she worked at a diner, that she made exceptional French toast according to the Thursday regulars, and that she had read the same 3 novels 6 times each because she found comfort in already knowing how things ended. "That is a reasonable strategy," he said. "Most people think it is strange. Most people are scared of endings," he replied. "Rereading means you have already survived the sad parts." She looked at the back of his head and thought, "This is a man who has survived something." She was right about that, too. Chapter 2, The Quiet Court? Over the next 8 weeks, Victoria requested Daniel's car 14 times. She told herself the first 3 were coincidence. By the 4th, she stopped pretending. Their conversations had a rhythm to them, slow to start, and then suddenly, effortlessly deep. He asked questions the way people do when they are genuinely curious rather than performing interest. He listened without interrupting and responded without rushing, and there was something so unusual about that in a world full of people waiting for their turn to speak that Victoria found herself saying things she had never said aloud to anyone. One night, stuck in traffic near the river, she told him about the conditional love that had shaped her childhood. Not the whole story, just pieces of it, the parts she had to handle carefully, even in her own mind. He listened and then was quiet for a long moment. "You learn to need very little from people," he said at last. "As a survival strategy, that is sensible. But it must get lonely." She had no answer for that, not because he was wrong. He told her things too carefully, in small portions. He had grown up far from the city, a place he described as very different from anything you would know. He had responsibilities there once he had stepped away from. He did not say why. She did not push. He was protective without being controlling. She noticed that. The night a man at a crosswalk leaned into the car window and made a comment he should not have made. Daniel simply looked at the man with those dark, still eyes and said nothing. The man stepped back, just like that. Mary noticed before Victoria admitted it to herself. "You light up when you talk about him," Mary said one evening with that particular pointed gentleness that was her specialty. "I talk about him clinically," Victoria said. "I will describe him. You described the exact angle of his jaw when he is thinking, Vicky. That is not clinical." Victoria drank her tea and said nothing, which was as good as an admission. He asked her to dinner on a Tuesday. Not through the app, he stopped the car outside the diner where she worked and walked in while she was on shift, sat at the counter, and ordered coffee. She went to him with her notepad and said, deadpan, "I am not sure my driver's rating will survive this." "I am willing to take the risk," he said. "Dinner Friday. I know a place that does things to chickens that would genuinely change your life." That is a significant promise. I do not make promises I cannot keep. She wrote "Dinner Friday" on the back of a receipt and tucked it into her apron pocket. Mary, watching from the other end of the counter, gave a discreet fist pump toward the ceiling. Dinner turned into 2 hours of conversation that felt like 20 minutes. Then a walk along the waterfront that lasted another hour. Then a shared order of terrible late-night donuts from a cart near the bridge. Standing in the cold, laughing about things that would not have been funny to anyone else. He walked her to her building, stopped at the security door. "I had a good evening," he said. "You sound surprised," she replied. "I had forgotten what this felt like," he said simply. "I did not know I had missed it." She did not know what to say, so she said goodnight and went inside and stood in the stairwell for a full minute, pressing her back against the cool wall, trying to slow her pulse. "You do not fall for drivers, Victoria. You do not fall for anyone. Not anymore. Not so fast." She fell anyway. He proposed 2 months later, not with a restaurant reservation and a ring in a champagne glass. He did it standing in her kitchen while she was making pasta for them, the simple kind, with oil and garlic and whatever herbs she could find. And he simply stopped what he was doing, came to stand beside her and said, "I want to marry you, Victoria, not because I think I should. Because I think life is genuinely better when you are in it, and I would like to stop doing it any other way." She stirred the pasta. Then she turned off the stove. "Yes," she said. Obviously, yes. He had a ring. Small, elegant, with a dark blue stone that caught light in unexpected ways. He slid it onto her finger, and she looked at it for a long moment. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "It was my mother's," he said. She did not know then what that meant, that his mother had been a queen, that the stone was from a mine that existed in a world she had not yet learned to understand. She did not know any of that. She just knew it was beautiful and that it fit perfectly as though it had been sized for her, specifically. Later, she would learn it had been. Chapter 3. The weight of other people's opinions. The wedding was small, 40 people, a rented garden space near the city park, wildflowers and candlelight. Victoria wore white with a sash of deep red because she liked red, and nobody was going to tell her otherwise. Daniel wore a dark suit that fit him with the kind of precision that made Mary quietly remark to her partner that the man carried himself like someone used to being looked at. It was the happiest day of Victoria's life. The opinions started before the cake was cut. Her Aunt Gladys, a woman whose hobby was being loudly correct about other people's choices, cornered her near the dessert table and delivered a speech that lasted 4 minutes without pausing for breath. The summary was, Daniel had no visible career trajectory, no property, no discernible connections, and a general air of mystery that was apparently suspicious rather than interesting. "What exactly does he do, Victoria? Drive people around? For how long?" "For as long as he likes, I imagine," Victoria said pleasantly, and moved away before her aunt could reload. Her mother was more subtle. She took Victoria's hands after the ceremony, looked at the ring, and sighed the particular sigh of a woman who has decided to accept something she believes is a mistake. "He seems kind," she said. "Kind is nice. Kind does not pay rent. Between us, we manage," Victoria said. "For now," her mother replied. Victoria smiled tightly and went back to her husband. Daniel noticed. She could tell by the way he came to stand beside her, not drawing attention to it, not making a production of it, just positioning himself close enough that the warmth of him was there if she needed it. Ready to go, he murmured near her ear. More than I have ever been ready for anything, she said. Married life with Daniel was in the simplest possible terms peaceful. She had expected adjustment. Every couple needed adjustment, but with Daniel, the adjustment was less about compromise and more about discovery. He cooked not casually, but with the intensity of someone who had once had a great deal of things prepared for him and had decided to learn every skill himself when that life ended. He cleaned without being asked. He remembered small things like her preferred tea, that she needed 30 minutes of quiet after a difficult shift, that Thursday evenings she liked to read without interruption. He was steady in a way she had not thought real men could be. She learned pieces of him slowly, the way you learn the rooms of a large house one at a time, each one revealing something unexpected. He spoke 3 languages she could confirm, and she suspected more. He had scars, not many, but significant ones that he never explained, and she never asked. He woke at unusual hours sometimes, standing at the window of their bedroom, looking at the dark street below with an expression she could not name. Once she asked him what he was thinking about. Counting, he said. Counting what? Things I am grateful for, he said, and came back to bed and pulled her close, and she felt his breathing even out before hers did. She thought, there is something enormous behind this man, something he has folded very carefully and put away. She thought, one day it will unfold. She hoped she would be ready when it did. The comments from outside their marriage did not stop. She had expected them to slow after the wedding. They did not. Her coworker at the diner, a woman named Pam, who believed frankness was a virtue and tact was a weakness, said over the coffee machine one morning, "You know what your problem is, Vicky? You are too easy to impress. A man who is nice to you is just nice, not successful, not ambitious, and you think that is enough." Victoria poured her coffee. "Ambition without character is just speed in the wrong direction," she said. Pam blinked. Victoria picked up her order pad and went back to work. She was getting better at this, at holding her own ground without needing to shout. Daniel, she had noticed, almost never raised his voice. He simply stated things clearly and waited. The people who mattered eventually came around. The people who didn't. She was learning that this was enough. Chapter 4. Cracks in the ordinary. The first sign that their life was not what she believed it to be came on a Wednesday morning in their 4th month of marriage. She was at the kitchen table with her 2nd cup of tea, reading one of her 3 beloved novels, when she noticed that Daniel had left his jacket over the back of the chair. He had left early that morning, quieter than usual, his phone pressed to his ear in the hallway before he thought she was awake. She picked up the jacket to hang it. Something fell from the inner pocket. It was a photograph, old, printed on thick, formal paper of the kind no one used anymore. The image showed a young man standing at the center of a large hall filled with people. He wore dark, structured clothing with markings along the collar that she did not recognize. The people around him were bowing. The young man's face was Daniel's. She sat down very slowly. This is not possible. This is some kind of costume, some kind of event, a theater production, a cultural ceremony. There is a logical explanation. She put the photograph back, hung the jacket, drank her tea, went to work. She said nothing to him that evening. But she watched him with slightly different eyes that were looking now for things she had never thought to look for. She found more. In the 2nd drawer of his desk, she had gone there looking for a pen. She told herself, and told herself again there was a folder. Inside were documents she could not fully read. Some pages in a script she did not recognize, others in English, but with terminology that made no sense to her. References to territories, to agreements, to a succession. The name Alpha Rain is used like a title. There were also newspaper clippings, international ones in various languages. A photograph of a summit of some kind, powerful-looking men and women around a table. One of the chairs was empty. The caption beneath it in English read, "The absence of the Alpha King continues to fracture peace negotiations." She stared at the empty chair for a long time. She put everything back, closed the drawer. That night, when Daniel came home and kissed her at the door and asked how her day had been, she said fine, and meant it, because she had decided consciously, deliberately, that she would wait. She would not confront him from a place of fear or accusation. Whatever this was, she would wait until she understood it, or until he chose to tell her himself. Trust, she had learned, was not just given. It was chosen daily, even when it was difficult. She chose it. The men started watching the building 1 week later. She noticed the car was first black, expensive, always parked on the opposite side of the street. Never there when Daniel was home. Always there when he was not. Once, she caught the driver watching her walk to the corner store, his gaze direct and assessing in a way that made the hair on her arms stand up. She told Daniel that evening, as casually as she could manage. His face did not change expression, but something happened in his eyes, a shift, fast and controlled like a door closing. How long, he asked. 4 days, maybe 5. I am not sure when they first arrived. He was quiet for a moment. You are not afraid, he observed. I am watchful, she said carefully. That is different. He looked at her for a long moment. I need to make some calls tonight, he said. I will explain things. Not tonight, I need to make sure of a few things first, but soon. I promise you, Victoria, soon. She nodded. He made his calls in the other room, his voice low and controlled. She sat in the kitchen with her book open and her tea going cold, not reading, not quite listening, just present in the quiet and waiting for whatever was coming to arrive. It arrived sooner than soon. 3 nights later, at 2:15 in the morning, the building's lobby intercom rang. Daniel was already awake. She had felt him shift beside her an hour before, lying still with the particular alertness of someone who was not sleeping. He went to the intercom. She heard a voice, not a single voice, several of them, low and layered in a way that sounded odd, almost ritualistic. Daniel's response was 3 words she did not recognize in any language she knew. Then he turned to her and said, very quietly, Victoria, put your coat on. What is happening? She asked. I am going to show you, he said, but I need you to trust me for the next 10 minutes. Can you do that? She looked at him, this man she had married. This man she had slowly come to know in all the ways that mattered, and in none of the ways she apparently should have been paying attention to, and she said, I have been trusting you since the first night you noticed I had my keys ready. Something moved across his face. Something she would only later understand was relief. Then come with me, he said. Chapter 5. The Kneeling Wolves. The lobby of their building, when they reached it, contained 7 men. They were dressed in dark, understated, civilian-looking clothing, but they stood with a stillness and a physical presence that filled the modest space completely. They were not young. They were not old. They were the kind of people who looked as though they had been shaped by something more serious than ordinary life. When Daniel pushed open the stairwell door and stepped into the lobby, every one of them went down onto one knee. At the same time. Without a word, Victoria stopped breathing. The man at the front had older, silver-streaked hair. A jaw like carved stone raised his head and spoke. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of a man accustomed to being obeyed. My king, the eastern borders have been breached. James Anderson has moved against the southern territories. He has your name in his mouth, and he is not speaking it with respect. My king. Victoria heard the words. She understood them individually. The combination of them, in relation to the man standing next to her in a plain gray sweater and worn boots, took several seconds to land. Daniel, her rideshare driver, her husband straightened in a way he had never quite straightened before. Something she had not seen in him surfaced. Not arrogance, not performance, but the genuine ease of authority, like a man putting on his actual posture after years of politely compressing it. How many, he said. 40 armed. They took the southern passage at midnight. There is one more thing. The man paused. His eyes moved briefly to Victoria and then back. They know about her. The room went very still. They know, Daniel began. They know you are married. They know she is here. Anderson believes she is a weakness. Daniel turned to look at her. His expression was the most complex thing she had ever seen on a human face. Apology and urgency, and something fierce and protective all at once. Victoria, start from the beginning, she said. Her voice was steady, which surprised her. All of it right now, he told her. Not all of it. There were decades and complexities that could not be compressed into a lobby at 2 in the morning, with 7 men kneeling at a respectful distance. But he told her the shape of it, the skeleton, the parts she needed. He was Alpha King of a pack that spanned more territory than she had imagined could exist outside of history book. His kind wolves, he said, waited for her to react, and she made herself not exist alongside human society in the hidden spaces between ordinary life for centuries. They were not monsters out of stories. They were organized, governed, with their own law and their own systems of power and their own particular brand of politics. He had held the throne from the age of 22. He had been, by all accounts, a strong and fair king. But there were those in his council, one in particular, a man named James Anderson, who had wanted the throne for themselves and had been patient about it. The way truly dangerous people are patient. 4 years ago, an attempt had been made on his life. Several of his most trusted lieutenants were involved. He had survived. He had chosen not to retaliate, not immediately, not while the pack was already fracturing. Instead, he had stepped back, quietly, under the story of a rogue, a wolf who had separated from pack structure. "You disappeared on purpose," Victoria said. "I needed time to rebuild trust, to identify who was loyal and who had been turned, to wait for Anderson to expose his ambitions publicly so that the council could see what I had always known. And driving people around the city, it was a way of being nobody, of watching, of thinking." He paused. "Of meeting you." She absorbed this. Then "The ring! Your mother's ring." "My mother was the previous Luna Queen," he confirmed. "The ring was passed to me to give to my mate, to my queen. You knew when you gave it to me." "I knew before I gave it to you," he said quietly. "I knew very early. The bond is not always a choice among our kind. But I would have chosen you regardless." She looked at the ring on her finger. The dark blue stone catches the lobby's dim light. She had so many more questions. They were stacking up inside her like freight behind a closed door. She put them aside. "What do we do first?" she asked. Something shifted in his face, relief again and gratitude, and something warmer beneath both. "We will get you somewhere safe," he said, "and then I finish this." Safe turned out to be a building on the west side of the city that looked like an ordinary office complex, and was, in fact, a fortified safe with 12 of Daniel's most trusted pack members already inside. Victoria was given a room, a change of clothes, and an explanation of basic pack protocol delivered by a young woman named Sarah, who was efficient, kind, and clearly had experience explaining enormous things to overwhelmed humans. Then Mary arrived. "She called me," Sarah said, with an apologetic expression. "I am your emergency contact," Mary said, walking in with her bag on one shoulder, and the expression of a woman who had decided she was going to be useful, and emotions could wait. "Also, a very fast internet search suggests that wolf packs are real and have been documented. I feel that I am handling this well." "You are," Victoria said. "I am going to need several hours to stop handling it well," Mary said. "But first, are you safe? Is Daniel on your side?" "Yes and yes." "All right then." She sat down. "Tell me everything." Chapter 6: The Storm and the Crown. James Anderson arrived in the city on a Friday. Victoria learned this from Sarah, who delivered the information along with breakfast, and the calm efficiency of someone reporting weather. Something significant. Something requiring preparation, but nothing that could not be managed. She had been in the safe house for 3 days. 3 days information, of learning, of asking every question that had been building inside her and receiving honest, if sometimes staggering, answers. She knew now about pack hierarchy, about mate bonds and their significance, about the particular power of an Omega with royal bloodline, which, according to Daniel's most senior advisor, an older woman named Cressida, who communicated largely through meaningful silences, and the occasional devastating observations, was what Victoria was. "My bloodline," Victoria said, the first time Cressida told her. "Your maternal grandmother," Cressida said. "She left the pack before your mother was born. She wanted a human life and she built one. But the blood does not disappear. It waits, and waited for me." "It woke when you bonded with the king," Cressida said. "The two of you together with his alpha blood, your Omega royal line activated something old, something that makes you more than simply his wife. It makes you formally and powerfully his Luna." Victoria sat with this for a long time. Then she said, "I need to understand what that means, practically, if things go wrong." Cressida looked at her with an expression that may have been approved. "It means," said Cressida, "that you have more authority than you know, and more protection. Though Anderson does not fully believe that yet, which is why he considers you a target rather than a threat." "Let us make sure he learns the difference," Victoria said. She was in the East Room with Mary and 2 of Daniel's guards when they came for her. Anderson had sent 12 men. Professionals. In the way that people are professional when their profession is something no law enforcement agency officially acknowledges. They came through the building's loading entrance, a route someone had clearly mapped in advance, and they moved quickly. But Daniel's people moved faster. Victoria heard it before she saw it. The controlled commotion of a building full of trained wolves responding to an incursion with the precision of something that had been rehearsed many times over. Many centuries, no panic, no chaos, ordered, efficient, overwhelming. They still got to her, two of them, through a service door she had not known existed. Into the east room before the guard outside had fully turned. What happened next, Victoria did not entirely plan. The first man reached for her arm. She turned into his grip rather than away from it, something she had learned years ago in a self-defense class she had taken after the situation with Calvin, and used his own movement to put him off. Balance. He went sideways into a chair. Not down, not done, but surprised. I was surprised enough. Mary, who had been quietly picking up a heavy reading lamp the moment the door opened, introduced the second man to it with considerable enthusiasm. Both men were restrained by Daniel's guards 30 seconds later. Victoria stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, and thought, I did not break. I did not run. I stayed. Then the wall beside the door cracked straight down the middle, not from force, but from something else entirely. Something that came from her, from some deep place she had not known existed, that radiated outward in a wave she could not see but everyone in the room clearly felt. The two restrained men went very still. Mary whispered, Vicky. I know, Victoria said. I felt it too. Daniel arrived 4 minutes later. He came through the main door fast, not running, but moving with that particular controlled urgency of a person who will not allow themselves to show fear but is carrying it. And when he saw her, standing in the center of the room, unhurt, he stopped. He crossed to her in 3 steps and took her face in his hands. Victoria, I am all right, she said. Mary has a future in security if she wants it. I heard, he said, was looking at her with an intensity that made everything else in the room go quiet. I felt what you did, the surge. It should not have been possible, yet the bond is still new. You should not have that level of ability. Well, she said, apparently I do. He almost smiled. It did not quite make it, because there was still too much ahead of them, but it came close. Anderson has called for a council assembly, he said. He is claiming the throne in my absence. He is using the fact that I have been rogue as grounds for forfeiture. What happens if he succeeds? War, Daniel said simply. The pack fragments. The agreements that have kept our world stable collapse. People are hurt. Many people, she held his gaze. Then do not let him succeed, she said. Go to the assembly. Go to the throne. Go be what you actually are, Daniel. Stop hiding it. Understand what that means for you, he said. If I return formally, you return with me as Luna. Your life, my life was 2 jobs and overdue rent and a window that faced a brick wall, she said. I love the life I have built with you, but I am not afraid of a larger one. This time the almost smile became real. He took her hand with his mother's ring on it and held it. I would like to marry you again, he said. Properly. In front of my pack. You already asked, she pointed out. I am asking better this time. The answer is the same, she said. Obviously, yes. Chapter 7. The Luna Rise. The council hall was older than the city built around it. It existed beneath a building that tourists photographed for its architecture, and that the pack had quietly maintained for 400 years. The hall itself was vast and circular, with a high ceiling held up by columns carved with markings. Victoria was only beginning to understand, each one a record of every Alpha King and Luna Queen who had stood in this space. She stood at the entrance with Daniel on one side and Cressida on the other, wearing something she had not chosen, a deep robe of midnight blue that Cressida had pressed into her hands that morning, with the words, You are not arriving as a guest. The hall was full. She had not expected that. She had known there would be a council of 12 elders, Daniel had explained, plus representatives from every territory. What she had not anticipated was everyone else. Hundreds of pack members filling the upper gallery, silent and watchful, their attention like a physical weight pressing down into the space. And at the center of it all, standing with his hands behind his back before an empty throne, was James Anderson. He was tall, pale, silver-haired, in the way of men who want to appear distinguished rather than old. His eyes were cold, the particular cold of someone who has spent years calculating and very rarely feeling. He looked at Daniel when they entered with an expression of practiced contempt. Then he looked at Victoria, and something flickered surprise, reassessment, something closing off quickly behind his careful expression. "You bring a human woman to a council assembly," Anderson said. His voice carried easily in the stone hall. "This is what the great Alpha King has become, a rogue who plays at ordinary life while his territories burn." Daniel did not respond. He walked steadily, unhurried, the way a man walks through a space that belongs to him, through the center of the hall toward the throne. The council members he passed turned to face him. Anderson's men, positioned around the edges of the room, tensed. Anderson raised his voice. "By law of the council, a king who abandons his throne for more than 3 years forfeits his claim. You have gone 4. The succession falls to the next eligible alpha." "To you," Daniel said. His voice was quiet and filled the room completely. "To me," Anderson confirmed. "The law is correct," Daniel said. "Abandonment does forfeit the claim." He paused. "I did not abandon the throne, I was protecting it," murmuring through the gallery. "Records exist," Daniel continued, his voice steady, "of communication with every council member sent through proxies, encrypted, consistent for the past 4 years. The council has been advised of every significant territorial development. I have not been absent. I have been operating without the visibility that my enemies required to finish what they started 4 years ago." He turned to face the council. "James Anderson was one of 3 conspirators who planned my assassination. The other 2 are already in council custody. I have been waiting patiently, as a king must sometimes wait for the moment when he stood in front of everyone and showed you exactly who he is." The hall went very still. Anderson's expression shifted for just a moment, the calculation cracked, and underneath it was something rawer and less controlled. "You have no proof. Cressida," Daniel said. Cressida moved forward from Victoria's side and placed a bound document before the council's senior elder. The elder woman of extraordinary age and very sharp eyes opened it, read the first page, and looked up at Anderson with an expression that needed no words. Anderson moved. He was faster than she had understood wolves to be, lunging from the center of the hall toward Daniel with a violence that was sudden and absolute. He did not reach him. Victoria was not entirely sure, afterward, exactly what happened. She knew she stepped forward. She knew something rose in her, that same surge she had felt in the safe house room, but larger, older, more deliberate, and it moved outward from her in a wave of authority that stopped Anderson 6 feet from Daniel as thoroughly as a wall. The hall fell completely silent. Anderson was on his knees, not kneeling, forced there by something none of them had expected from a human woman in borrowed midnight blue. His expression was, for the first time, completely without calculation. "I was afraid," Cressida said softly but clearly, to the council and the gallery and everyone in the hall. "Luna." The word moved through the room like a tide. Then, one by one, council members, then gallery members, then finally, even Anderson's own men, they knelt. Daniel took the throne. He sat in it the way she had always imagined a real king would, not grandly, not theatrically, but as someone finally, simply, in the right places. He held out his hand. Victoria crossed the hall through 700 years of history, through all those kneeling figures, through the weight of something ancient and enormous, and took it. She sat beside him. The senior elder rose and addressed the assembly. "The Alpha King has returned. Luna has been recognized. The council acknowledges the bond." And the hall, from floor to gallery, responded with a sound she had never heard in her life. Not words, not applause, but something deep and collective and resonant, like a single great exhale. Victoria kept her spine straight and her face calm, and her husband's hand in hers. Her mother had said, "Kind doesn't pay rent." Her aunt had said, "What does he even do?" The world had said, "You settled." She looked out over hundreds of people who had just knelt before her, and she thought, "No, I chose it, and choosing well is the bravest thing you can do." James Anderson was taken into custody that evening, tried under pack law within the week, and stripped of his title, his territory, and his seat on the council permanently. He was not a young man, and his ambitions had consumed the better years of his life for an outcome he would never reach. Victoria felt no satisfaction in that. She felt something closer to sadness. The sadness of watching someone lose everything, because they wanted what they could never earn. She told Daniel this one evening, weeks later, sitting beside him in what was technically a throne room, but had been furnished, at her insistence, with actual comfortable chairs and a side table for tea. "You feel compassion for him," Daniel said, not surprised, just observing. I feel compassion for what he wasted, she said. There is a difference. He looked at her in that particular way of his, the one that felt like being seen clearly all the way through. I have a confession, he said. Another one, she replied. He almost smiled. I drove that stretch of road near the diner on purpose, the night we first met. I had been told by Cressida, who meddles when she is right, and she is annoyingly always right, that I should spend more time in that part of the city. Victoria set down her tea. You are telling me that was not a random pickup. I am telling you it was not random. I did not know who I would find. I did not know. He paused. I did not know I would find you. That part was not planned. She considered this. And the seatbelt? She asked. That, he said, was genuinely because you had not buckled your seatbelt. She laughed, a real one, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and unguarded, and he watched her do it with an expression. She understood now as the particular joy of a man who had carried heavy things for a long time and had found unexpectedly something light. The second wedding was everything the first was not. Hundreds of people. A ceremony conducted in the stone hall, now lit with something warm and extraordinary. Victoria wore midnight blue, the same color as the stone in her ring, and walked not down an aisle but across the hall floor with Mary beside her, because Mary had insisted and Victoria had not wanted. Anyone else, Daniel met her at the center. He looked at her the way he always looked at her, completely, without pretense, and said the words of the formal pact binding in both languages, the old one and the ordinary one. She said them back. The senior elder placed a hand over their joined ones and said, the bond is witnessed, the king and his Luna. What was broken is restored, what was hidden is now known. May this union hold what needs holding and weather what needs weathering. Victoria squeezed Angel's hand. He squeezed back. There are things about Victoria Wanda, Victoria Ashford. Now, though she used both names depending on the day and the context, and her mood would tell you if you asked her about the shape of the life she had built. She would tell you that love is not something you fall into or stumble upon. It is something you choose, daily, even on the days when it is difficult or inconvenient, or requires you to trust when your instinct says protect yourself. She chose Daniel on a rainy night when he reminded her to buckle her seatbelt. She chose him again when he could not yet tell her the truth. She chose him in a stone hall when 700 years of history was watching. She would tell you that the people who say you are settlings are usually people who have never understood the difference between greatness and visibility. A quiet man who sees you clearly is worth 10 loud men who perform for a crowd. She would tell you that the thing she is most proud of, more than the throne, more than the pack bond, more than whatever power Cressida says she carries in her bloodline, is that she never stopped, trusting her own judgment, even when everyone told her she was wrong. She was not wrong. She was exactly right. Moral lessons and educational value. 1. Choose character over circumstance. Victoria's family judged Daniel by what they could see. A modest job, no visible wealth, no social proof. They were wrong, spectacularly. The story reminds us that how someone treats you, sees you, and shows up for you consistently is worth more than any title or paycheck. Character is not what a person owns. It is what they do when no one expects anything of them. 2. Trust your own judgment. Victoria was told, repeatedly by people who loved her, that she was making a mistake. She listened to them, considered their concerns, and chose differently. That took quiet courage, the kind that does not announce itself. Learning to trust yourself even when the world disasserts is one of the most important things any person can do. 3. Patience is a form of strategy. Daniel could have confronted Anderson directly after the assassination attempt. He chose not to, because he understood that winning badly is still losing. He built his case, identified his allies, and waited for the right moment. There are problems in life that patience solves better than urgency. 4. Secrets kept from love do damage even when the intention is protection. Daniel's silence cost them both anxiety and distance. He made the right choice eventually. But the story shows us that honesty, even difficult honesty, is ultimately a form of respect. The people who love you deserve the truth.